Hello and good day. Welcome to the Super Good Camping Podcast. My name is Pamela.
I'm Tim.
And we're from supergoodcamping.com. We're here because we're on a mission to inspire other people to get outside and enjoy camping adventures such as we have as a family. Today's guest is a gentleman we had the pleasure to chat with just over a year ago. Feel free to go back and listen to that episode. He loves to camp, particularly via canoe, and he is excellent at his chosen profession. Please welcome a revered deity in the Ontario backcountry community, Jeff McMurtrie of Maps by Jeff. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for stopping by, man.
Yeah, I love it.
On a beautiful Sunday morning.
So the first thing I would like to do is correct an oops that we made last time. At least I'm pretty sure. We talked about maps, and in particular, you had spanky new Algonquin, the purple ones. But I don't think we listed all the parks that you have mapped. Do me a favor. Tell us what you've mapped out before.
Yeah. I mean, so as you're saying, it's been a long time, lots of maps. So as you said, there's Algonquin to start. And then I've got Killarney. That was, I think, the second place I ever did. I've got French River, Kawartha Highlands, Massasauga, and from a long time ago, Temagami.
Right. Okay. So there's my second question. That's sort of what tweaked in my brain, because I didn't realize you had a Temagami map. It's digital. Why is it only digital? Out of curiosity, more than anything.
No, good question. So when I first had released it, there were waterproof printed copies too, but unfortunately that was kind of around the time I had some business partner problems, had to leave Jeff's Maps. That's where I had created them at that time. And so after that, I still owned. I came to understand I still own like the copyright to the map, but I didn't have any more waterproof ones around. But some actually exciting news is that this summer there should be some new waterproof ones. I'm doing some updates and corrections and that sort of thing. So that, again, I don't have a firm timeline. That's kind of what I'm actually about to start working on, but July-ish.
Looking forward to it. That's excellent.
As you were listing the different ones, I know Tim in his head, he's like, check. Oh, need that one, check.
Yeah.
Very true. Because I do. I have everything except the Temagami one. And I was looking at it going, 2014. I wonder if he's going to update that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's been something I wanted to do for a long time. And, there's just always so many projects. So for, all those years, there was the Algonquin one. And then, I've been working on updating like the Killarney and stuff to add some of those features I'd added a year ago. And so, that's where the Temagami map was sort of on the list for after. So here we are,
Sweet. So we've got the Temagami map to look forward to. And if you're tweaking other ones, give us all the news. What's happening? What's happening with your stuff, man?
Yeah, no. Hey, so I've got coming out very soon a new Killarney map, as well as West French River. So I've had both of those for a number of years, but I've added the features I added to Algonquin first to these guys. So I've got things like for the portages, there's a little side view showing where the hills are. I've got more points of interest. I've zoomed them in about 50%. So I've done that with Algonquin first, where essentially rather than having the map on a single side and a bunch of text on the back, now I've got map on both sides. So I've done that for the Killarney and French River too. And really, especially, I guess, with that extra zoom, it's both allowed me to sort of space things out a bit so stuff isn't quite as crammed in, but also it's let me add a lot more detail, a lot more information that otherwise there wasn't space for. So that's pretty exciting. And then on top of the Killarney and the West French River, I've also now got an East French River map. So essentially, the West French River one had gone from Killarney. In particular, there's Point Grandine, kind of on Georgian Bay. So it had gone from there to roughly Highway 69, just a little bit past that. And so then the East French River clicks into that. It goes from essentially Highway 69 all the way up to Lake Nipissing. And so then it covers the whole French River. And actually, if you do end up getting all three maps, you get digitally, you get a single file covering Killarney and then the whole French River. So you're going all the way from Lake Huron across the whole northern Georgian Bay, and then up to Lake Nipissing. So yeah, that's the current very exciting thing. I had just finished that. As we're recording, it's at the printer right now, and I think when this is released, it'll be pretty darn close. So
Sweet. I have to make a point of giving a shout out to or give a shout to Alex and Jess. They've got Tents and Timber.
Yeah,
we've been talking about doing a trip together, and one of the things they're trying to combine it into, because they've got a block of time that they can get out and paddle. They were talking about doing the French River from Nipissing, and I pulled out my French River map and went, "Oh, it doesn't go all the way." Now they can spend money, and they can plan it better. That's awesome.
So one question I had was, are there certain areas, when you're mapping, is it every single inch of the area that you're mapping, or are there parts where you're like, this is really too rough, it doesn't really have anywhere for people to go, or it's a protected area, or it's a sensitive area, we don't really want people to be traversing around in there? Do you kind of pick and choose how much detail you go into in certain areas, or you just, this is the whole thing?
that's a really good question. I am certainly receptive to concerns about particular spots or issues, but speaking again, other than, I guess, very, very, very particular situations, it would really just be, add all the info, right?
Yeah. Just so you want people to know everywhere where they're going, all the options, the places to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's where, I guess, kind of an add-on to that is one of the things I've learned over time is, well, in a sense, it's obvious, right? But different people have different things they want to experience, different sort of levels of pain they're willing to go through to get there. And the maps I make, they're certainly very paddling specific, right? So they're not for snowmobiling or ATVing or that sort of thing. But within the paddling realm, I certainly do try to cover everything from maybe what a first timer might want to do, all the way up to somebody who's into bushwhacking and exploring off trail. And so that certainly is a challenge in terms of presenting the information to make sure that, again, the new person or the person who's looking for a nice relaxing trip isn't finding themselves bushwhacking through the middle of nowhere. And so on some of the previous maps, the Unlostified ones, I'd first added these color-coded route difficulties, right? So there was yellow, orange, and red, and white as well for sort of first-timer stuff. But the idea being that it was typical, challenging, very difficult. And one of the things I found at one point is that some people, had a different understanding of what does very difficult mean. Right? Because when I'd done that, when I added that first, I thought, oh, this is great, right? Because I can show stuff that maybe some people don't want to do because, see, it says right there, very difficult in red, right? So, yeah, like I said, some people have a different understanding of very difficult. I guess in particular, I really remember there was a review of the Kawartha Highlands map, an old version, on the MEC website. This person, I feel so bad for them, right? But this person was very upset because they had done one of these red, very difficult routes. And I guess, to put it mildly, it was not what they were hoping for, right? And it was funny, right? Because I'm like, oh, I've had friends who've done this, in particular, Brad Jennings explored that country. He had done that, had a lot of fun. And then a couple other people have done it. But again, it's a mindset thing, right? And so what I'd done, I guess, to sort of address that is, starting with the Algonquin maps, I decided, well, again, I still want to show these routes because I enjoy them. Some other people enjoy them. But again, you want to make sure that the right people are doing them. So rather than putting them as red, I decided to show them as penciled in. And there's big warnings on them saying, this is really tough and you probably shouldn't do this, right? And so if somebody wants to do it, great, they can, but, they've been warned. And I guess the key to the pencil sort of style look is it doesn't look like the other routes. So there still are the yellow, orange, and red. But essentially, if you're doing one of those normal routes, there's degrees of pain, degrees of difficulty, but there's still a trail, right? And you don't have to know anything about, bushwhacking or whitewater or whatever, right? If you put one foot in front of the other, you will get there. So I thought that was kind of an interesting sort of problem. And certainly since I'd done that with the Algonquin ones first, now on these new ones, I've certainly not heard of anybody accidentally doing one of them. So
yeah, that's good. And you're absolutely right. Different people, different perspectives, but also as like I remember, go back a bunch of years. That what if I did one of your yellow routes, it might have been a little bit of a challenge at the time. Now it's like I don't even think about it other than looking at that's a 4-kilometer portage. Maybe not particularly interested putting that kind of miles on. But as far as difficulty goes, it's like, yeah, I can do that in my sleep. There's always that. There's that. Yeah, as you gain experience, it changes your perception of the difficulty of a route.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And just for the record, I think the side profile thing that you've got for portages is genius. I can't believe that never occurred before. Like that's so you look at it and you go, perfect. I can do that, and I know where I'm going to run into trouble, whatever. That's excellent.
Yeah, I mean that was. I really enjoy, I guess, designing new features because something like that, like you're saying, right? Like I didn't go and find it on some other map and say, "Hey, that's a great idea. I should do that here." Right? You got to figure out, okay, what's the sort of question somebody's asking, right? So people obviously ask, hey, is this a flat portage? Is this a steep portage? That sort of thing. And at least my perspective going into it was that, a long portage, sure, it's long, but you can always take breaks. Right? But a steep portage, it can be short and it can be the sort of thing that gets burned into your mind because you're trying to walk up this thing, the front of your canoe is like banging into the trail in front of you. There's no spot to take a break because you're going up the incline. And so the question then comes down to like, okay, so this is you want to show this to people, but how do you do it, right? How do you make sure, because they're little portage graphs, right? On the map, they're, I don't know, like not even an inch, right? Maybe a centimeter and a half by a centimeter. So how do you make something so small, but still make sure that people can read that, maybe in bad lighting conditions, whatever, and understand, what they're going to be up against. So there's all sorts of little design stuff in there to sort of make that happen. But yeah, I certainly enjoy that challenge.
Well, and is there indication of the, like as you said, like there's the steepness, but there's also the quality of what you're walking on. Is it a rock garden that you're walking through? Is it just a flat like ground somebody's walked through many times? Is there a way to indicate that?
Oh, that's a great question. No, that's something I don't do right now, and I've been like thinking about. And the question that I have to figure out is how do you I guess categorize that? But it is very valid, right? So this has come up once or twice where Algonquin, for example, right? That's where I'm most familiar. But sort of the northeast side of the park along the Petawawa River, there are a number of portages where you're walking over this like shaley stuff, like small rocks. And every time you take a step, you're on sort of the side of a hill at times. So every time you take a step, the gravelly stuff underneath your feet, moves and you hear it rolling downhill and whatever. And certainly that is a lot more challenging than just a dirt path. So yeah, I mean, I think that's something I definitely want to add, and it's simply a matter of figuring out like what are the categories or how do you present that in a digestible way. But it's a very valid point.
Yeah, that made me just think about Camper Christina. Sucky muck is a phrase that she uses, right? And I've been places that she's been, and I've done them in a dry season, no sucky muck. So how do you put that on a map to go? It's really challenging if you're there in May because it's wet as all get out. You're up to the top of your boots. You're probably going to get your boots sucked right off of your feet. But in July, not so much.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's where sometimes I'll add notes for that sort of stuff, but that certainly is the challenge, right?
Yeah.
And especially, to your point, I'd love to do it in a more holistic way, right? Um, so yeah, no, it's very much on my mind.
Yeah, must suck to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning dreaming about maps and stuff you're going to do.
Yeah. Or going like, oh, how can I add that? How can I make this look like that?
Yeah.
I find that a lot of fun, sort of working on the same project for a long time. Like now I started this thing like 19 years ago. I was like late high school, early university. And, but the reason I find it a lot of fun is because almost to your point, it's always neat to be figuring out how can I do better at this? What are, again, better ways I can convey this information? Sometimes it can be, figuring out how do you categorize things like we're talking about. Sometimes it can be, just figuring out like what should the icon look like? Because ideally, there's the map legend explaining everything, but ideally you want things to be as explanatory as possible.
Snapshot. Yeah.
Self-evident.
So exactly. So how do you sort of, again, I have ideas of what I'm trying to communicate in my head. I try to, put them into these symbols and colors and icons and, transmit that to the person on the other end. And so, sometimes that works really, really well. Sometimes there can be confusion. And that's where, again, you're always trying to think about how can I improve then,
Well, yeah. And so speaking of that, like all the things that are on your maps, there's the topography, as Tim said, of the portages. There's points of interest, as you said. So there's a waterfall here, and you might want to alter your route so that you can take in the beauty of that waterfall. But yeah, just tell us about some of the icons that are on your maps.
Sure. Actually, let me just pull that up so I have the complete thing in front of me. 1 second here. Hey. Okay, yeah. So as you're saying, there's quite a variety of stuff. It's all the sort of bonus bits, along the way. Where you certainly have a fun trip if you didn't see this stuff. But again, to me, it's like you're talking about soaking in the beauty of a waterfall, right? It really, these points of interest can add this extra dimension to the trip, right? Sometimes that's where the special memories come from. So, yeah, I've got quite a variety. I think there's like 20 odd sort of types of points of interest. There's things in the sort of historic category, like old ranger cabins, fire towers, other sort of buildings and artifacts, a lot of logging stuff from, 120, 150 years ago, that sort of era. Painting spots, right? So, especially in Killarney and that sort of area, but even in Algonquin and some other spots, you've got, the group of seven did a lot of painting. And so there's a bunch of sort of iconic paintings where you can go to that spot, which is kind of cool. Big cliffs and rock outcrops, lookout points. I mean, that's where, again, especially with Killarney, right? It's got the big mountains, the La Cloche Mountains, and so you get some amazing viewpoints. What else have I got? So old growth forests, forest fire sites. Again, I was talking about French River. There was a huge fire back in 2018. And of course, in a sense, it's quite destructive, but fire happens in nature. And so now you go back to the same areas and you get to see that regrowth happening and nature, springing back, and that transition from the burned forest to eventually what will be, big trees again many, many years from now.
Yeah. Well, just to interject, our eldest and I did the French, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, something like that. And we actually saw the end of the burn. We're looking across at rocks and blackened trees. Like it was wild to look at that and then go green, not green.
Yeah. No, exactly. And to me, all these points of interest, they add that extra dimension to the trip. They help you, I think, in a sense, understand the world differently, right? So whether historic sites, you understand the people that have come before you, or earth science, life science. Again, to see the fire like that, it's something that I think you can think about in a very academic sense, like, oh, it's a big fire and things happen. There's transitions that happen in terms of growth and whatever. But it's another thing to stand there and be like, wow, that's crazy. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty mind blowing to just go that's where it stopped burning. It couldn't make the jump, right? Like, holy mackerel, that's crazy. Very cool.
Yeah, exactly.
So sorry, continue on.
Oh, no. I mean, you're sort of making the point for me, but again, I guess I'd even touched on that there, that there's some earth science stuff, life science stuff. A sort of random fun one is there's some spots where you can like grab an ice cream bar mid-trip, which is just like a neat, weird thing, you know?
Yeah, Tim didn't know about those spots.
Yeah, you know, it's like in Algonquin, for example, in Algonquin, there's not a ton of spots, but when I was young, it was always me, my dad, and my brother going on trips, and we do a lot of like 20, 23-day, that sort of thing trips. And the way we would do it is we would start sort of down near Highway 60 in Algonquin, and we do big loops, right, in 20 whatever days. But very roughly, about halfway along, we'd stop at Brent, which is sort of an old railway town in the sort of top middle of the park. Again, nowadays it's more of a cottage community, but there is a little store there. And so it was a huge highlight of the trip when you go in, you grab an ice cream or a pop or a bag of chips or whatever, right? After, 10 plus days. Just little memories, like I was saying, right? Little tidbits along the way. And then I've got swimming spots and spring water. And spring water, again, I'm sort of evoking memories as I'm talking, right? But I remember sort of plenty of times where it's like August and it's like 30-something degrees out, and you take your Nalgene and you fill it with spring water, and that thing like frosts up. There's nothing better, right? And we're almost on this list, but there's, especially in Killarney, there's some super clear lakes, of course, waterfalls, fishing. So in a sense, there's something for everyone, right?
Absolutely. Well, and as you said, like, it just adds that extra layer. I would come back from a trip, and then if I saw the map after that, I was like, I could have seen that waterfall. I paddled right by there. I didn't even know it was there. I'd feel so cheated. So I so appreciate that. I won't feel cheated now.
Well, it's funny because I've done the same thing, right? Because again, I mentioned on these new maps, the Killarney and French River, there's a bunch of additional points of interest. So there's both more types, but there's more quantity too, right? And so I've gone through that exact same thing. It's like you've been to a place, and then after you read online or look at some old map or whatever, you're like, oh, turns out right around the corner was a waterfall, historic ruins, whatever, right? But it's, in a sense, then you have an excuse to go back, right? So, as if you needed one. But
Tim doesn't need any more excuses.
But I now have an excuse to buy more maps. Just saying.
Thanks, Jeff.
But it's kind of fun because I'm in the same boat as you, right? Like you might look at the map and say, oh, there's this new thing. Well, in some fashion, I find some new thing, right? Not looking at my own map, but again, it could just be somebody talking about it online or emailing it in or whatever. And so it is kind of neat that you're going back to this place you've been before, and you look around this other corner and like, ta-da,
There's an interesting point. You said email it in. Do people reach out and say, hey, I found this cool thing and I thought I'd let you know, or I had this thought about something that I didn't see on your map, or something that I liked on, like, how does feedback work for you? Do you get a decent amount of it? And is it engaging? Is it good stuff?
Yeah. Oh, excellent question. Yeah, no, I mean, it is extremely useful, right? I certainly do get a good amount, and more is always better. So, person watching this, feel free to email me, jeff@mapsbyjeff.com. In terms of points of interest and other things too, the way I always pitch it in a sense is, I've spent 700 and something days paddling. And so a lot of people will ask about Algonquin, how much of Algonquin have I done? And I've done maybe 70%. And again, that pretty much extends to the other parks too, like Worth Highlands and Massasauga and French River and Killarney. It's similar. less days in those places, but similar sort of, amount of exploring. But even then, there's places that I haven't been in 10 years. And so having people write in and say, hey, this changed is extremely useful. Actually, one, for example, on the new Killarney map is there's a lake there, Pike Lake, which essentially it was there's like a big pond and there's a sort of long stretch of narrow lake coming off of it. Well, that's how it used to be. It was, I think, 2023. There was like a massive beaver dam holding up the lake that blew. So now, the eastern 2/3 of the lake, the sort of narrow bit, is now a creek that's, a few inches deep. So I've been to Pike Lake. I've been back since then, and that's a pretty big thing. So it went from being a nice, easy, paddleable lake to a mud puddle, certainly on that side. So that sort of info is great. And even again, like we were talking about earlier, to sort of make the connection, the portages, and you're talking about sort of trail condition, right? Well, that's an example of something that I honestly hadn't thought of. Someone else brought up. I use the Petawawa example. That was their example, and it's like, well, that's a good point, right? And there can even just be things where there's stuff that is super clear to me. I mean, that's the thing. I make the map, so I know what I'm saying, right? And then, people will write in and say, I don't get it. And that's great when people say that, because even if they're not explicitly saying that's confusing, that's what they're saying, right? Again, like I talked about the idea that I'm trying to, put my ideas into symbols and colors and whatever, put on the map, and they're trying to decode it. Well, if they don't get it, that's a sign. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing that could be more useful than people writing in. The map certainly would not be what it is without that.
Cool. I will add to it in a positive sense. One of the things I like most about your maps is that snapshot. Like you can look at it and through osmosis, like just taking a ton of information right out of the gate, right? Which makes so our eldest is my paddling partner for the most part, and if I spend a lot of time looking at a map, when we're in the canoe, he gets unhappy because he's the only one that's paddling. I'm looking at a map. So if I can go click, okay, got it. We're up and around the bend here for this. There's where the portage is, whatever. Because I just it's all laid out for me. It makes him he likes it better when we're traveling with your maps. Just saying.
No, I mean, and I think it's very practical, because that situation, I've been on the other side of that when I was the one paddling and Dad's looking at the map. You're like, I want to go, but I just imagine, it's pouring rain out. It's windy. You're like bouncing up and down the boat. You're like, I want to get to the campsite, and so again, like to your point, the worst thing is you're trying to like look at this and decode like, where are we? What's going on? So it's so key to be able to look at the map, figure out what you want to figure out, and go.
Yeah, agreed. And my kryptonite is scale. My brain just won't. I'm looking at a map and I go, well, it's got to be right there. It's not. It's 20 miles in that direction or whatever.
Or this bay looks like it's that size, but it's not. This is not the right bay. This is the next bay over that we want.
So I'm looking forward to seeing larger. If you 50% increase, that's going to make my life way better, which will make the big kids' life way better as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the zoom, right? And it's always, honestly, it's just about, I wish I could go even more, but it's something like Killarney, and I don't want to have more than one map for Killarney. French River, certainly I don't want to have more than the two I already have. So, but that's where, the little tricks like the double siding would ever really help that.
Yeah, I like that idea.
And did you choose these particular locations because they're your favorites, because they're the most popular, they're the most in demand? How did you choose which ones to map?
Well, that's a really good question. It's a mix of both. And it's funny because like the irony in a sense is I love going places that people don't want to go. But of course, those don't make for popular maps. But it works out because, if you take a place like Algonquin or honestly, even Killarney, there's going to be places that are busier. and there's going to be places that are less busy. Certainly, I think there's more less busy places in Algonquin just because it's a bigger place. So if you want to put the time and effort to sort of get to the middle or other little corners, you can certainly get away from people. But it applies to Killarney too. And again, to connect back to what we were talking about earlier, about route difficulties and stuff. There's always going to be some of those, sketchy bushwhacky things or just harder routes. So to answer your question, there certainly is an element of places I want to go, places I want to check out. But it certainly is there. I'm picking places that I know that ultimately I can sell them at.
Yeah, well, yeah, business plan has to play into it. I'm very glad you've done the ones that you have done because they're definitely my favorite parks. Like I love Killarney, Algonquin,
Kawartha Highlands.
We do Kawartha Highlands literally every fall. We've done the Massasauga now, so that was another good one. We've done the French. Yeah. I see Temagami in my future. I've actually, when I discovered that you had a digital one, I started looking at routes, and it was totally accidental. I didn't mean to go looking. I saw it, and then 2 hours later, it's like I already have a whole bunch of trips planned this year, but there's next year, so
never too early to start planning.
It's not
exactly. And that's one of the fun things. Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I'd say one of the fun things about doing each of the maps is that certainly there's a lot of similarity, right? Like, you're paddling, you're camping at campsites, there's portages, but there certainly are little differences too. And so it's really interesting going to a new place and sort of trying to understand it in a sense. It's little intricacies and whatever. And so like talking at Temagami, I remember there's sort of new things that I'd never experienced. Nothing huge in a sense, but little things like in Temagami, some of the portages are cut more narrower. So that can be more challenging when you're carrying the canoe. There's certainly spots you're like walking and suddenly the canoe's stuck. And then, from a mapping point of view, one of the little interesting challenges was that Temagami, it's sort of this network of small little parks and crown land, right? And conservation reserves and that sort of thing. So there's maybe, I'm just guessing off the top of my head, let's say there's 12 little parks, and different parks have different rules. Some of them you have to have like a permit for camping. Some of them you don't. Some of them you might bump into motorboats. Some of them you might not. And so, for something like Algonquin, I didn't quite have to worry about that because there's one big park and the rules are the same and, easy peasy. But for Temagami, I essentially had to come up with a way of how do I communicate this information? The person using the map needs this. And so it's interesting from a challenge of how do you present this perspective. But I also find that then you end up learning, when you learn these things, you take that information and you bring it back to the other maps, and it improves them too, right? Because in a sense, it's a sort of thing that you could get away with doing a meh job on because it didn't matter quite as much. But certainly when you do a better job of communicating these things, well, it's easier to read, easier to understand. A lot of times, again, it's just something I didn't think about for Algonquin. Sort of the different rules and parks, because there are certainly other little parks around the periphery of Algonquin I show. But it's just, again, it's easy to sort of hand wave that away when it's not the focus of the map. But something like Temagami has forced me to do a better job. So, yeah.
Yeah, good point. It's funny. You mentioned you run into motorboats and stuff. It took me ages. Feels like it took me years and years to figure out that pretty much every access point you're going to run into motorboats. You have to do a portage in or two portages in before you go, okay, now I'm away from those guys. Like I didn't realize that literally all the parks have cottages and stuff around the periphery of the park itself. I had no idea.
Yeah. And even on Crown Land too, you face this sort of stuff, and it took me even longer to understand, because at least in a park it's kind of spelled out: motorboats here, no motorboats here. With Crown Land, it's like, well, they're allowed everywhere, but you realize over time it's something you were kind of getting at, which is they physically can't get everywhere. So, for example, maybe there's a lake and then there's a river. If you have a waterfall in between, they're not going upstream, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, how to escape motorboats.
Yes. There's a book. There's Kevin's next book.
There you go. It just writes itself, you know.
See, being the wonderful storyteller that you are, you regaled us with what was it last time? It was a 31-day trip. Oh, you were young. You were like end of high school sort of deal. It was awesome. Tell us another trip, just because we like stories. That's a thing for us.
Oh, I guess I'll tell you about last spring's trip.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it was me and two other guys. And again, I was talking about those route difficulty colors before, right? The yellow, orange, and red. And then there's kind of the pencil stuff. So we were off in the pencil land of, extreme adventure. And so what we done last spring, this is Algonquin, the very bottom part of the park, okay? And so if you look at my map, you'll see that there's these long 2-kilometer-ish portages, little pond. Long 2-kilometer portage, little pond, and they're all the portages are in red because they're kind of, pretty rough,
nasty.
But it's this one-way trip, and I was looking at the map, right? Obviously, and one of the features I added to the Algonquin map is the creeks on the map. The width of the creek on the map correlates to the width of the creek in real life. So if it's bigger in real life, bigger on the map, right? And so that got sort of the wheels turning. And so we came up with this idea of doing a loop. So we'd start by going through that long series of stuff in the park, but rather than going back up the same thing, we would, what do we do? So we got to this lake called Scorch Lake, camped there. And from there, there was a road, sort of a minor road that you go 2 kilometers, you meet up with this more major road, walk another 2 kilometers, get to this lake called Lost Water Lake. And from there, again, this is where I'd seen this wide creek. So that was sort of the inspiration. So we put in at Lost Water Lake, paddle for a few kilometers. And I mean, the one thing is, the width, you never know the depth, right? So you're always doing this fingers crossed thing. But we were super lucky. The first, again, like 4-ish kilometers or whatever was wide and deep. It was exactly what you're hoping for. So that was very, very cool, right? And as you're paddling it along, you're wondering, when's the last time someone was here, right? That sort of thing. And we got to a spot where I knew there was going to be some rapids, but there's another road nearby. So it was okay, we'll connect up to this road, which we did. And we're our plan from there. This is where things didn't quite go as planned, right? The adventure struck. So at this point, we were going to, this new road that we'd hit, it kind of paralleled the creek for the next, let's say, 2 kilometers. And we'd seen in sort of satellite imagery that it looked very bushy in there, right? Like alder and that sort of thing where, you're fighting through the bushes. So we're like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to walk 2 kilometers along this road. That should get us around the worst of it. We'll paddle from there. And so we get ready to portage, we eat some snacks or whatever. And like 50 meters later, the bridge is out. And this is spring, so you got water just pouring down. So challenge number 1 was we had to sort of bushwhack around and find a spot where we could cross. Did that. Then you walk the 2 kilometers and you're just walking at the road, so it's not too bad. Bushwhack down to the creek, and of course we did not miss all the alder. We had about 2 kilometers of alder ahead of us, turns out. So we skipped 2, we have 2 more. So we're paddling and pushing through us. And I mentioned it was me and 2 other guys. So me and one other guy were in a tandem canoe. The other guy was in a solo. And he had like a double-bladed paddle. So he couldn't even lift the paddle. Every time he tried to lift it, it would get caught up. And he's saying, what are we doing here, right? So eventually we said, screw this, and just bushwhacked for another kilometer or so, and got around it. And that was that. The funny thing was that when we'd, that spot where I mentioned the bridge was out, if we just gone the other way on the road, about 2 kilometers, we would have been to the exact same spot where we'd, bushwhacked and fought through and everything. And so it was just kind of funny. But hey, we made it. We're alive. That's good. And we made a loop where there was no loop. So, I would totally do that again, just going the other way on that road.
The McMurtrie loop.
Yeah, exactly. So, fun.
Yeah, well, sure. type 2 fun. It's funny when people get into, every time I hear bushwhack, alder comes up as well. It's always, it's like, oh, and, scratch the crap out of me. And, oh man, it took me days to get through there. I know, part of Kevin Callan's presentation, I can't remember which one, maybe the Toronto Outdoor Adventure Show. He was talking about a trip that he and Andy did way north. And it took them something like some ridiculous, like 6 days to go 4 kilometers, which is, that's insane, man. Like, and alder was a word he kept using. So,
yeah. That's where it's always funny. You'll see the odd person on Facebook or whatever saying, hey, can I skip that 2 kilometer portage and take the creek? And I guess they're imagining, they don't like portaging, so let's just not do that. And yeah, the portage exists for a reason. It is so much easier. It is so much easier.
Yeah. Why would somebody unload everything, and lug it for 2 kilometers if they didn't have to? So just saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's a random tangent, but I remember the first time I was doing Crown Land, canoeing stuff, it was like, where's the portage going to be? And it's exactly what you're saying. People hate portages, so it is literally the last place it could possibly be.
Yep. Chris Prouse said, if you don't know where the portage is, look around, look for the lowest point. That's probably where the portage is going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've done that more than once, and ended up within 100 meters or whatever of wherever it is. So there's a good one.
And that's the thing. The one thing that unites paddlers, or one of the things that unites paddlers, is our collective hate of portages.
Yeah, hate's not too strong a word there.
Otherwise, we'd be backpackers. So
yeah, I'd be a hiker, but I hate hiking. So I don't hate hiking. I just rather not.
I know.
I'd rather
exactly.
The canoe carries the stuff, not me. Yeah,
exactly.
For sure.
Well, that was a question I had, because if people are giving you feedback on like, okay, here's a point of interest or whatever that isn't like, obviously if it's a printed document, you can't just go print another batch right now. So it's going to be the way it is for a while, but then you can update the digital.
Yeah. I mean, certainly in the past, I haven't really done a lot of updates to digital versions. There's certainly something I want to do more going forward. But right now, my workflow isn't really set up for it, right? It really is designed for, you build up this big map over many months, and then it actually takes like a couple days to get digital sort of stuff set up. And so that's why it's like, oh, it'd be great to make this one little fix or change or whatever. But then there's always other projects. And so it's like, yeah, I'll get to that at some point. And it doesn't happen.
So many hours in the day.
Exactly. No, exactly, right? Because you get people saying, well, what about new maps? And you're like, yeah, I should do that. And you got to do updates to other maps. And there's always new stuff to be done, right? But this is something I really want to be able to do more. And so one of my next projects, sort of after the Temagami, is I want to work on changing then how I build the maps to make it a lot easier to make more frequent updates, at least to the digital version. So, it's kind of exciting to be able to do that, but that's in the cards.
So with the printed maps, people get a digital copy of the map as well, right?
Well, and there are multiple versions of that digital as well, right?
Yeah, no, exactly, right? Because so I figure once somebody buys the map, right, really it's all the time and effort, whatever that I've put into it, that's what you're paying for. And then I want you to be able to use it in as many ways as possible. I've included as many formats as I can possibly think of. Right now there's 5. There is a JPEG, which is sort of for computer. You can blow it up. You can even print blow-ups. It's super high quality for that exact reason. So you can, do a blow of your trip. There's an Avenza Maps version for iPhone and Android. So that's fun, and it has GPS sort of capabilities. So you're the blue dot in the map, and that can be handy. Again, for the age old, like, is this the bay or is that the bay, right? There's a Garmin
Hail
GPS
town.
version. Yeah, exactly. There's the Garmin GPS version, same sort of deal. There's a Google Earth version, and that's super cool because you get this like 3D view on the world. So again, especially for the bushwhacky, explory stuff, I've used that before to sort of plot out where we're going to go. Because again, you're talking about hills and valleys, and I guess we were talking about that in the context of existing portages, but even bushwhacking, it's some of the same logic, right? Yeah, using the 3D Google Earth is super handy for that. And finally, there's a more technical file called GeoTIFF, but essentially that allows somebody who has some very specific need. You can take this GeoTIFF and you can load it into essentially any mapping program. So even if it's something that I haven't thought of or doesn't even exist yet, that file, if you're technically minded, you can use for anything.
Cool. Where can people get all these maps from?
Oh, yes, great question. So the easiest way probably is to go to my website, which is mapsbyjeff.com. Oh, I got Maps by Jeff. Just add the .com. But they're also available at most outdoor stores and outfitters, right? So in Killarney, you got like Killarney Outfitters and Wichawa Lodge. Probably an outdoor store near you.
Very
Excellent.
cool. All right, I'm good. Let's wrap her up.
All right. That's it for us for today. Thank you so much to Jeff McMurtrie from Maps by Jeff for joining us today and for joining us the second time. So please do listen to his first episode, and then you can listen to the second episode, or listen to them the other way around. You can do whatever order you want.
And go out and buy his new maps, and then new maps again in July. You can spend money all year.
Get the maps. Well worthwhile. Tim will attest that you can spend money all year.
Indeed.
And please do listen to us again sometime soon. You can reach out to us anytime you want to. We're at hi@supergoodcamping.com. That's hi@supergoodcamping.com. And we're on all the social media. Please do check us out there. And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.